about rereading it so that I could refresh my memory. I just finished the Odyssey.
I know, and that's a dense piece of literature. I totally understand that.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and I'm a slow reader. I'm not as fast as you.
Yeah. So.
I'm like you were talking about one other time. I'm real slow and.
Yeah, I'm like 3 books further ahead of you, and you're just like, I haven't even finished the first one. But yes, I do. I am a very fast reader. So. Anyway, welcome back to Telltale, guys. I'm Emily.
I'm Greg.
And we are going to be reviewing Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. Fascinating human being, that Mary Shelley.
If you only know Frankenstein from any of the million movies that have ever been made,
you don't know Frankenstein.
You don't know Jack.
Jack. Honestly, I was blown away. I just finished this book last month.
Okay.
I had not actually read the whole thing. I've read excerpts for like college and high school things, but I had never actually read the whole work. And I was amazed at how much frickin' artistic license Hollywood takes from this piece of literature. There's nothing. The whole, like, Frankenstein coming to life from electricity, not a thing.
Sewing together from dead pieces, there's nothing of that
not
in there.
a thing. No, he's a chemist. Victor Frankenstein is a chemist, and he does not reveal how the monster comes to life.
Yeah, the actual process of him making the monster is just alluded to. It's not described very much. It just kind of he's in somewhere working by himself, and then all of a sudden there's this other character, this monster running around. But the book isn't really about creating a monster. No. Well, it is and it isn't. It isn't about the science of reanimating life. It has nothing to do with with the book Frankenstein.
No.
It's more of a Jekyll and Hyde story. It's about the sides of our psyche. Is what he does is he creates the evil side of himself.
Essentially, yes.
And so he spends the book confronting, his good side and his evil side, confronting one another and battling with one another through the book.
Yeah. It's kind of like the desire to play God and then being haunted by what happened when he tried. And I think a lot of it, too, was the story of the monster itself is really interesting, because, like, it came from having it was a clean slate being. I don't know if anybody's familiar with Caspar Hauser, but Caspar Hauser was a feral child that was as clean slate as we've ever discovered a feral child.
Okay.
No sense of language, no sense of anything.
Okay.
Like, very, very little human development. Pretty much a basically all instinctual being. Which is kind of what this monster was. And so, like, this monster ends up, like, kind of wandering around after it existed because Victor Frankenstein ran away once he saw how hideous it was when he was successful. And so the monster just goes loose and starts running across the countryside and, like, finds this family that he can kind of, like, peeping Tom spy on, and learns language from them, and, like, learns the Bible, like, I don't know if it was the Bible or some kind of story that they read from all the time, but he learns basic letters and sounds and develops language, and then, like, tries to appeal to the family that he's a living being, and they scare him away because it's a kill it because it's different and hideous situation. So the only chance this being feels like he has at love or any kind of acceptance in society is, like, basically completely destroyed in him. So he demands Victor make him a partner so he doesn't have to be alone. And Victor refuses. So then he's like, fine, you've damned me to live unacceptably, or unaccepted, so I'll live unacceptably. And just starts killing off Victor's family and other people and friends and, like, just wreaking havoc and stuff. So Victor ends up having to basically make this vow to destroy this thing or die trying. And so, like, the whole thing starts as a series of letters from this captain who's in the Arctic, who finds Victor very emaciated and sick and hypothermic, and is, like, recounting this tale to his sister, who's, in England.
Yeah.
And so or Sweden or something. I can't remember if it was Sweden or England.
I don't remember either.
Yeah, something like that. Somewhere in that European area.
Yeah.
So the whole story is just really interesting. There's so much artistic license that was taken. There's no Igor.
No.
Never was.
No.
He's not real. He's not a real thing.
That was Hollywood again.
All Hollywood. Like, that character was never... That's all artistic license.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny how that's been so perpetuated.
Mm-hmm.
Like, none of that was in the original story at all.
Yeah.
Like, I think my favorite Hollywood Frankenstein was in Van Helsing. Have you seen that movie?
I have.
Hugh Jackman as Van Helsing. Yeah, I love that version of Frankenstein, but it is not at all the monster that's in here. Also, I have to say, like, everybody uses Frankenstein as if it is the monster, and the monster has no name. Victor Frankenstein is the only Frankenstein. But I think people make that connection between the psyche of the monster being an extension of himself.
Yes.
So much that they do become interchangeable terms.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not accurate.
No. And, my favorite Frankenstein is Young Frankenstein.
Yeah, Young Frankenstein. So good. It's a good one.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, the story is so vastly different than what I expected.
Yeah.
And I think, like, Victor Frankenstein being a chemist, he intentionally says at some point in the book, I'm not going to reveal my methods of creating this monster. I refuse to let anybody make my same mistake. Mm-hmm. Which I thought was a great cover for trying not to make us a realistic sounding science for making this thing exist.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's very interesting because you can kind of figure out that a lot of it was him just growing things in a chemistry lab to see if he could, and then piecing them together. Mm-hmm. And then going on the run from his mistake, only for his mistake to follow him and haunt him until he died.
Yeah.
So it's really a very tragic story. By the end of it, you're almost relieved everybody dies. Spoiler alert. But they have to. You know what I mean? Like, the story is so terrible, the only closure you can have is to have everyone die in the end. I felt the same way about Wicked. Okay. The book Wicked by Gregory Maguire. The circumstances and, like, series of terrible events that happen, the only closure you have is if all the characters are dead by the end. Like, that's all you could want for them at that point. Mm-hmm. So in this book, I'm very kind of thankful that it happened that way.
Yeah.
Because that's the only way you could have gotten closure, and it's the only way the story could have had closure.
Right.
But it's really well done.
Mm-hmm. The one issue I take, a lot of people point to Frankenstein as the first science fiction novel. And okay, Frankenstein's, Dr. Frankenstein, he's a chemist, he's a scientist, but science doesn't really drive this novel. Because like we said, it isn't about the Hollywood vision of a guy in a laboratory putting together a monster. It's not really about that. It's more about the psyche.
Mm-hmm. This is a thriller. This is dark psychological thriller.
Well, it's a Gothic novel.
Yeah.
Back then, Gothic novels were not horror stories.
Nope.
They were thrillers. They were romances. They were very different from what we call Gothic today. There were no vampires. There were hardly any ghosts.
Mary Shelley
this
was
is
the
the closest
goth.
thing. Yeah, this is the closest thing to a to a horror story that came out of the Gothic literature of that time. I think.
This and romance stories were like it. This kind of writing and romance stories are all you really got out of that era.
Yeah.
But that's what people read.
Mm-hmm. Well, those were among the first novels ever.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't really count this as a science fiction story. I don't think science fiction starts until like Jules Verne, H.G. Wells. But it's definitely a great Gothic novel. It's definitely a really cool story. It's definitely a great psychological thriller, and it's a great book to read. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, it is, and the poking around that Victor Frankenstein does kind of has a little bit of you know who the culprit is, but like the how still feels like a whodunit. So you kind of get a little tinge of mystery in there, which is kind of nice. And, of course, there's a tiny bit of romance in there because Victor has a betrothed.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, though, I think the best thing about the book Frankenstein is just the life of Mary Shelley.
Oh.
In general. This woman was a badass.
Okay,
and also really creepy.
Okay.
She lost her virginity on her mother's grave.
Wow.
Yeah. I don't know what that means. Like, was that fuck you, mom? Or was it like, she's just like cemeteries and happened to be there and it got hot and I don't know. She used to carry around her husband's heart in a box after he died. I shit you not. This woman is like, whoa.
Wow.
She is something else. If you get a chance to read anything about Mary Shelley, she is fascinating. She is like goth before goth was goth.
Mm-hmm.
She's fantastic. So.
Well, her mother died giving birth to her.
Mm-hmm.
So that probably is part of why she.
And her mother was
her
biological mother was an open feminist.
Mm-hmm.
She was like
wrote
the first
one of the very first feminist books.
She wrote a lot of stuff too. And
Yeah.
her husband was a publisher, right? Mary Shelley's dad?
Yeah.
Yeah, he was a publisher, so that's how she kind of got her foot in the door for being able to write later, but
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember what her pen name was, though. Her pseudonym. Because she didn't write this book under her own name at first. She had taken a man's name to publish it at first. Yes.
I did not know that.
Yeah, she didn't do it. Yeah. If you get a chance, read a biography of Mary Shelley or autobiography or something. Because
there was a movie came out not long ago about her life.
Oh,
I haven't seen it yet.
She's a fascinating and weird person. She's goals. She's goals for what I would love to be someday. Anyway, maybe not all of it, but she's a really interesting person.
I've read all of her short stories, and frankly, those are really boring.
Yeah.
I didn't care for those at all. They
I
weren't
read,
anything like Frankenstein.
Yeah, I haven't read any of her other work, but I think Frankenstein is such a prominent work that it really overshadows anything else she's ever done.
Yeah.
But, you know, she does have dry European writing. There are points in Frankenstein where it's kind of like, it gets a little wordy. But overall, I think it's a really great story, and it's really interesting how different it is, and how, like, pop culture just, like, just blew this thing up to be more than it was.
What most people are familiar with is a completely different story.
Yeah,
it has nothing to do with this book.
It's so different. It is so different. But yeah, take whatever version of Frankenstein's monster you love the most and just watch it die.
Mm-hmm.
Because this will kill it on its own. This book will kill it on its own altar.
Yeah,
like it's so different. It's so vastly different.
Yeah,
but it's still a really good read. I enjoy it.
It is,
and it's a quick read again. It's not a very dense book.
No.
So, yeah,
that's all I got. So we'll see you again next time.
Subscribe. Let us know what you think of Mary Shelley. She's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, read about her.